young girl and her two dads drive off to a remote cabin in the woods. After 4 armed strangers break in, the family discovers their important role in stopping the apocalypse. Initially doubtful of the strangers' outlandish claims, they're forced to make a difficult decision between saving themselves or the rest of mankind. In a forest near their vacation cabin, Wen catches grasshoppers and places them in a glass jar. Suddenly, a tall, tattooed man named Leonard approaches and befriends her. While Leonard helps her catch the insects, Wen shares that she has 2 dads, making her different from the other kids. As Leonard listens to Wen, he suddenly gazes toward the trees, as if waiting for someone. When the girl notices his strange behavior, he offers to play a game so they can get to know each other better. They'll take turns pulling petals off a flower and ask each other questions. During Wen's turn, she asks Leonard why he came to the cabin, and he says he wants to be friends with her family. Afterwards, Leonard asks about the scar above Wen's lip, and she reveals she was born with a broken lip which took a lot of doctors to fix. Then, Leonard sees his 3 companions arrive. As they walk closer, Wen notices that they're armed, frightening the child. Before she runs back to the cabin, Leonard confesses that they have an important mission and that she and her dads will be forced to make a tough decision. He also advises her to let them in the cabin, because if they don't, they'll find another way. Wen runs to the back deck to warn her dads, Eric and Andrew, about the armed strangers. At first, they don't believe her, but when Leonard knocks on the cabin door, the suspicious Eric attempts to send them away. However, Leonard insists they let the group in, so they can speak face to face. As they communicate through the door, Leonard shares that the group is on a mission to save people. Andrew looks through the window, and he notices that one of them has a chained pickaxe, prompting him to call the cops. However, when Andrew attempts to make the call, the lines are dead because one of the strangers cut the phone line. After Leonard tries to convince them to let the group in, Wen asks why they've got weapons, but he corrects her, saying they're tools. When the couple won't let them in, the strangers attempt to break in, prompting the family to close all the windows and block the doorways. However, Redmond breaks the glass window to open the doorknob. Meanwhile, the others break in through the basement. Eric suggests the 3 of them run to the car, but before they open the door, a nervous Sabrina appears and knocks Eric down to the floor, where he hits his head and falls unconscious. Panicked, her instincts as a nurse compel her to attend to Eric's concussion, but the furious Andrew yells at her to back off. As they try to wake Eric, Redmond successfully enters the cabin and gets into a brawl with Andrew. After Andrew subdues Redmond, he's shocked to see Leonard holding Wen, with Adrienne by the imposing man's side. Years ago, Andrew tells his parents that he and Eric are together. Despite his parents' disapproval of their relationship, the couple promise to stay together. After Sabrina cleans Eric's head injury, he wakes up and realizes that he and Andrew are tied down to chairs, while Wen sits on the floor. The television plays a cartoon program, which Leonard thinks teaches empathy and tolerance. Enraged, Andrew suspects they targeted their family because they're prejudiced against the same-gender couple, but Leonard claims they have no prejudice or hatred towards them. The strangers then assemble to introduce themselves one by one. Sabrina says she's an experienced post-op nurse from Southern California. She used up all her savings to travel to Pennsylvania to talk to them. She has a half-sister back home who Wen reminds her of. Next, Leonard shares that he's a part-time bartender and a second-grade school teacher from Chicago who runs an after-school program. Then, Redmond speaks from his seat and doesn't want to reveal who he really is. Leonard scolds him and justifies that the introductions are necessary to carry out their mission. After Leonard explains that his aggression is scaring the family, Redmond gives in and says he's a single guy who works at a gas station in Massachusetts. He'd done foolish things in the past and did time in prison, but he's better now. While Redmond shares that his dad beat him up as a kid, Adrienne comes forward and interrupts him. Before she introduces herself, Eric says that if they're planning to recruit them to their group, there's a better way to go about it than tying them up. He then requests for someone to close the curtains, which Sabrina explains is because his concussion is making him sensitive to light. When Redmond agrees to fix the curtains, Adrienne abruptly introduces herself, saying she's a passionate line cook at a Mexican restaurant who loves to feed people and has 2 cats. Shortly after, Leonard states their mission to prevent the apocalypse, explaining that the fate of humanity is in the family's hands. To save the world, they must be willing to sacrifice one family member. If they don't comply, the 3 of them will live, but the rest of humanity will perish. The couple dismisses his extravagant story, calling him a lunatic. As Leonard explains the consequences, Eric insists that they didn't do anything wrong, to which Leonard agrees. However, they're the chosen family according to their visions. Enraged, Andrew claims that no sacrifice will happen in their family even if the world is at stake. Leonard claims that the four of them had visions of the apocalypse, which led them to find each other and the cabin. He explains that there will be a violent tsunami, a plague, the sky will fall like glass, and eternal darkness. Andrew rejects his statement, claiming that they're all delusional. Meanwhile, Eric calmly asks them how their family plays into their vision. So Leonard tearfully explains that every time they refuse to make the decision, a plague will be unleashed. Unfazed, the couple shakes their heads, prompting Adrienne to place Wen on Andrew's lap to protect the child from witnessing a gruesome sight. The trembling Redmond then kneels and places a white cloth bag over his head. Eric notices a strange light on the mirror by the door. Suddenly, the team executes Redmond by bashing his head with their sharp tools. Suddenly, Eric remembers him and Andrew adopting Wen when she was still a baby with a cleft lip. Following Redmond's passing, the team cleans everything up. Leonard then switches to a news channel, where they all watch a news report about a series of earthquakes and tsunamis happening in the Pacific Northwest. Leonard explains the first plague has happened as a result of Redmond's execution. As Adrienne and Sabrina watch the footage of the tsunami, they say that it's just like what they saw in their visions. After Leonard turns the TV off, he tells the captives that they'll need to make a decision first thing tomorrow. Eric then recalls the first day of their vacation. The family sings along to Boogie Shoes playing on the radio as he drives to the cabin in the forest. When they reach their destination, they swim in a nearby lake. Upon waking, Eric is in front of the bathroom mirror, being treated by Sabrina, who claims that she too didn't believe in the visions at first, but eventually did. Convinced Eric will feel the same way soon, she tries to convince him that the visions are real and he must take their side, but Eric refuses, claiming that he's on his family's side. Later in the living room, Andrew tells Eric about his suspicion that Leonard is timing all of the tragic events to make their visions seem real. Meanwhile, Wen attempts to flee the cabin through the basement, but Leonard catches her and brings her back. While Leonard pacifies the terrified Wen, Andrew claims that their family was targeted. He suddenly remembers the night he was attacked in a bar years ago, claiming that the attacker was Redmond. Eric corrects him that the man's name was O'Bannon, but his husband stands by his claim. When Leonard defends their companion, Andrew stands his ground and orders them to get Redmond's wallet so they can verify his real identity. He argues the fact that a man who attacked him years ago tied them up isn't a coincidence, and that they're victims of an elaborate setup. However, Leonard refuses to comply with Andrew's request, claiming that his name is irrelevant as long as he saw the visions too. However, Adrienne worries about their mission, remembering that it was Redmond who told them about the cabin on their message board, which is when they all started having visions of the cabin. Leonard corrects her, stating that they had the visions before Redmond informed them about the cabin. Thinking that the team is pulling a scam, Andrew, who's also a human rights lawyer, threatens them. Leonard responds by showing a photo of his students, implying that they inspired him to save them from the apocalypse. Before the sun sets, Leonard adjusts the couple's seats, making them face each other so they can reflect on their decision for the following day. The next morning, as Wen eats the delicious food Adrienne prepared, Andrew tells Eric his plan to get to the trunk of the car to grab the gun, after he can get free of the ropes. Afterwards, Andrew confronts them about how being in an online group could lead to a shared delusion that'll destroy their lives. Leonard defends the idea that they found each other because they shared the same visions and decided to meet at the boardwalk. As Andrew distracts Leonard's team, Wen hands Eric a knife which her dad uses to sever the rope. The team then assembles in front of the family, ready to hear their decision. Adrienne walks forward, confessing that she's the next to go if they refuse to choose a sacrifice. Eric tries to convince them that nothing will happen, but Adrienne insists that everything will stop only if they make a choice. She then reveals that she has a son named Charlie, whom she's seen perish many times in her visions of the apocalypse. However, the unconvinced couple remains firm in their decision not to sacrifice a member of their family, so Adrienne kneels and covers her head with a white cloth, sacrificing herself for the cause. After Adrienne's passing, Leonard declares the arrival of the second plague. He instructs Sabrina to turn on the TV, where they witness a deadly flu outbreak. Soon after, Eric confesses that he saw a figure, a reflection in the mirror behind Redmond before he was executed. Andrew tries to talk some sense into his partner, telling him that his concussion made him sensitive to light, hence the figure in the mirror. He then claims that the TV shows are pre-programmed, and Leonard and Sabrina only play the broadcasts when the time on their watches match, which is why they keep checking them. Suddenly, Wen shouts, demanding to watch her favorite cartoon. As Leonard is distracted, Eric finishes cutting the rope and then picks up the weapon on the floor to attack the tall man. As Eric threatens Leonard, Andrew breaks free and then rushes to the car. However, Sabrina strikes him in the knee, so he can't get away. He hits her in return so he can get in the car. As Sabrina tries to break the car window, Andrew goes to the trunk and opens a box, which contains an unloaded pistol. As he nervously loads the gun, she opens the door and hits the man, begging him to surrender. After loading the gun, Andrew shoots and threatens Sabrina, who eventually runs to escape. In the cabin, Eric continues to point a weapon at Leonard, who tries to calm him down. Later, he explains to the concussed man that their family was chosen to make a difficult choice because their love for each other is pure. Andrew returns to the cabin and points his weapon at Leonard, who tells them that it's time for the next sacrifice, and once again asks for their decision. Suddenly, Sabrina returns, but Andrew shoots, severely injuring the woman. Years ago at a bar, Eric comments on Andrew's temper, and the latter retorts about how he can be uptight sometimes. Suddenly, a man approaches them, disturbed by how loud they're talking. Andrew snaps back at the rude man, who walks away. Seconds later, the man returns and smashes a bottle on Andrew's head. Following this incident, Andrew decided to purchase a pistol. In the present, Leonard asks the couple for their decision, but they still won't sacrifice a family member. This prompts Leonard to strike Sabrina, effectively ending her life. As Leonard covers the lifeless woman, Andrew goes to Redmond's lifeless body to retrieve the ID in his wallet. He then returns to the cabin and throws Redmond's ID on the floor, revealing that he is O'Bannon, the man who attacked him at the bar. Afterwards, Andrew threatens Leonard, ordering him to go to the bathroom so they can lock him in. However, after closing the door, they heard glass shatter, making them think he escaped through the window. To check, Andrew takes the rope off the door and sees the shattered bathroom window. With Leonard nowhere in sight, he shoots at the bathtub curtain to confirm if he's there, but the tall man eventually pounces on him and grabs his gun. As Leonard points the gun, he orders them to turn the TV on, where they see multiple airline failures resulting in over 700 plane crashes worldwide. Eric remembers the third plague. The sky will fall and crash to the earth like pieces of glass. To convince him that he's seen this in a vision, Leonard turns his back to the TV and speaks the same words as the news anchor, but Andrew still believes that everything is just a trick. Meanwhile, Eric is starting to change his mind. Leonard requests that everyone move to the back deck. Before the tall man ends his own life, Eric commands Wen to go to the treehouse and listen to music, sparing her from witnessing another horrifying act. As he sits in the rocking chair, Leonard tries to convince the couple for the last time to save humanity by sacrificing someone from their family. However, when the couple refuses to make the decision, the tall man slices his own throat. Seconds later, a storm quickly brews in the sky. When the couple returns to the cabin, Eric discusses the figure he saw in the light once more, claiming that the arrival of the four strangers represents various aspects of humanity. Redmond represented malice, Adrienne represented care, Sabrina represented healing, and Leonard represented guidance. Piecing everything together, Eric deduces that the four strangers were the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and the family needed to feel their loss. When Andrew asks him why their family was chosen, Eric believes it's because they're capable of deciding, just like when they decided to adopt Wen. Aware that they're running out of time, Eric finally makes a decision. He hands Andrew the pistol, asking his husband to shoot him and save everyone, particularly Wen. When Andrew insists that he should be the sacrifice, Eric shares the future he imagines for them, wherein Wen has a great career and love life, and Andrew will be there to see it all. Seeing his partner's acceptance of his fate, Andrew finally pulls the trigger to prevent the apocalypse. After mourning his loss, the tearful Andrew rushes to the treehouse to hug his worried daughter tightly. Meanwhile, lightning strikes, setting the cabin ablaze. Before leaving the forest, Andrew and Wen watch the cabin as it burns. They then proceed to walk amongst the trees until they come across the group's vehicle. While driving, Andrew stops at a nearby diner, where they join other people watching the news. They learn that the ocean stopped rising, the rest of the planes landed safely, and no deaths from the flu have been recorded in the past 2 hours, confirming that Eric's sacrifice saved humanity. Later, Andrew returns to the vehicle and finds the four strangers' belongings: Leonard's certificate with his student signatures, Sabrina's nurse ID, a photo of Adrienne and her son, and Redmond's employee ID. Before hitting the road, Andrew and Wen are surprised and saddened to hear Boogie Shoes on the radio, the same song that was playing on their way to the cabin days ago, when Eric was still alive. After turning the radio on and went off, Andrew decides to keep the song playing as he and Wen drive off to start their new life without Eric.